to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brandon Black, and unfortunately, I'm not joined by my co-host today because neither one could make it. However, I am joined by a special guest, our first interview guest, Mr. Brandon Borba. Brandon, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
All right. Hey guys, I'm Brandon Borba. I'm 18 years old. I'm a senior at Tulare Union High School in Tulare, California. I will be attending Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in the fall of 2018 to study dairy science. And a little bit about myself, and I'll bring my family into it too. My family and I have been involved in agriculture since I can remember, since I was born. And my avo on my dad's side was a dairy farmer for his entire life. And now my uncle runs the business. But it's always been something I could go back to and lean on in my family, and it's always been a part of me and always will be. So that's a little bit about myself. So thanks for bringing me here.
Absolutely, today, Brendan. Thanks for coming. And to give you guys a little bit of insight on the outside of the podcast, before I started this show, I actually asked Brandon here to be my original co-host. The only reason he couldn't is just because, schedule complications, and it was just a little rough. But I think that I speak for myself and both my co-hosts to say that we're glad to have you on the show today, and we're glad to see you in future episodes. Granted that you're willing to come back.
Oh yeah, get used to my voice, everyone. I'll be back for sure.
All right. So to start off with, I have a few questions for you to start off this interview. And the first one I want to go over is why did you join FFA originally?
Well, I knew that when I was in middle school and coming into high school, the transition was a little bit hard for me, as it is for everyone. But I knew that coming into high school, I wanted to be in some sort of agriculture class because that was my choice of career. I wanted to pursue a career in agriculture, and I didn't know what it was at the time, what career I would choose, but I knew that taking the path through FFA for a career in agriculture was the right choice for me because it's the best route to take.
Awesome. So why don't you start off by telling our audience here a little bit about some of the things you've done at FFA, what you've gone to, what you've participated in, what you competed in. Just give them a little bit of insight.
Okay, so you guys probably know about Brendan and Abby and Evan by now, that they're pretty involved. They are in speaking competitions, judging competitions, officers, delegates at conventions, the whole 9 yards. Unfortunately, I'm not up to their standards, but I'm still quite involved. In FFA, I haven't done any of these judging or speaking teams. Instead, my whole FFA career is based around showing dairy cows. And that's what I've done throughout high school, and I got involved because of my family history, and my dad got me involved and introduced me to it, and I thank him for that, and it's been one of the best experiences of my high school career. And now I get to pass on the showing legacy in the Borba family to my little brother. So that's what I've done. And even though I wasn't on these judging or speaking teams, I was always involved by going to meetings and other FFA activities. Like we have, like movie nights and stuff like that, and simple stuff.
Well, you've gone to a few leadership conferences
too.
I
have. The past 2 years, I've been fortunate enough to attend the 89th and 90th FFA state leadership conferences. Those have been some of the best experiences I've had in FFA, and you meet so many new people from different parts of California. And Brendan can speak on behalf of the national convention because he's been to that how many times? Three times. And he can tell you that when you go to these conventions, you meet so many different people, and you see the variety of agriculture that is present in our nation. And for me, that all I got to see was in our state, but Brendan can tell you about in our nation.
Absolutely. So I know you talked about it a little bit when you were introducing yourself, but could you go over your future aspirations again, like what your career goals are and kind of where you're going and how FFA has helped you reach this point?
Yeah, for sure. So after graduating Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, when probably in like 2022, around that time, I intend to pursue a career breeding dairy cows in the Central Valley with my own breeding business. So that's always been something I've been interested in. Besides, cows I've always been interested in, but that specific aspect of the dairy industry I've always had a little bit of a want to try and pursue a career in. And there's another part of dairy cows and the dairy industry that I've always been interested in, and that's management. So if I'm given the opportunity to manage a dairy in the future or just oversee the operations, I would gladly take the opportunity and run with it, because it's been a part of my family for as long as I can remember, and I'd like to keep the whole tradition going.
Yeah, sounds good. So just kind of, you're talking a little bit about some of the things that you've noticed and that you've developed and skills that you've learned from FFA, and you're talking about how you're not quite as involved as some of your peers, but you are more involved than some of your other peers. So what, just from your experiences, could you tell us a little bit about, what you've learned from this organization, what it's helped you with, what kind of skills you've developed, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Some of the things I've learned from FFA are how to be a leader, and I've learned a lot about myself as well, just from my experiences and being evaluated by my peers and educators. So one of the things I've learned about myself is that one day, if I wanted to, I could possibly be an agriculture educator, because I didn't know beforehand that I was capable of teaching children or even high schoolers or adults about agriculture. I just knew that I could give a presentation, but I didn't know that I was capable of keeping these kids interacted and interested in something that you would think they wouldn't have an interest in. And that's what I've learned about myself. And the whole leadership part that you learn in FFA is you learn how to stand in front of a group of people and give a 30-second speech, or even longer than that. If for some of you, 30 seconds to you is probably like a blink of an eye, because you do the extemporaneous stuff and all that. But yeah, you learn how to be a leader, and you learn how to stand above your peers and colleagues. And the way I learned that is I learned how to be a leader from being a mentor to my little brother, especially after he started showing dairy cows. I've been able to show him what it takes to be good in the show ring, and what it takes to handle an animal, and all the other aspects of showing dairy cows, which he didn't know before he got involved, and I was able to show him. So that's how I've learned how to be a leader, and a lot of stuff I've learned about myself just from being involved.
That's great. And I kind of wanted to really focus on that last part you're talking about, being a leader. Keep in mind, this is coming from somebody who wasn't an officer, didn't do a whole lot of speaking or judging teams, and went to a few conferences, but even though he wasn't as involved as some of his peers, he still understands the importance of leadership and what role it has on your development as just a person and a community member and that kind of thing. I think that's really important to kind of focus on, is that leadership is something that's just, it's universal. You don't have to be an officer to be a leader. You don't have to be a public speaker to be a leader. But he's taken leadership into his own hands in teaching his brother how to show. I think that's really something special and something that needs to be recognized a lot more often. So yeah, I think that's going to kind of transition us into one of our next question parts that we're going to go over here. So from what I understand, you are a part of, I guess you call it a class. It's this new group that's being started by one of our ag teachers, Mr. Tano, where you and another group of kids go to 8th grade, you go to middle schools and you talk to 8th grade classes about agriculture and about FFA, and kind of help them understand where their path in the agriculture industry is headed. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
So, Brendan summed it up pretty well, but I'll go a little bit more in depth. Myself and 7 other team members, so a total of 8 of us, we go to various middle schools around Tulare County. Some of them, you might know the names: Pixley Middle School, Tipton, Cherry Avenue. Those are just some of them, but there's more. And we go around giving either presentations or taking them on field trips or showing them various FFA activities, just to get their feet wet in the agriculture industry and give them the precursor to what high school is about. High school agriculture is about. And it's a lot of fun. We take them on, like I said, field trips. We've taken them to the World Ag Expo. We took them to the fair. Took them to UC Davis Vet Center. And we took them on a tour of a local dairy farm. And it's just those little activities. We give them a little bit of information at a time and give them that little introduction to agriculture, so they're ready for high school agriculture and they can excel more in high school.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool program to initiate, and it's only been around for a year or two, right?
Yeah, a year. Well, they did it last year too, so yeah, this is the second year.
Yeah, and it seems, well, from what I understand from talking to our teacher, which I'm not part of the program, but I've seen what you guys have been doing. From talking to our teacher about it, it seems like it's expanding pretty rapidly. Am I?
Yeah, in fact, in the last month and a half, we've attained 2 more schools to join on this program next year. Alpine Vista and Palo Verde are going to be joining next year, and those are 2 really big name schools, or for middle schools, I guess. Not, I don't know how you have big name middle schools, but they have a lot of potential with ag students,
which is really exciting for me to hear, because I went to Palo Verde from kindergarten to 4th grade, and actually while we were doing 8th grade recruitment day over at the farm, I actually talked to a couple of my old Palo Verde teachers, and they were telling me that they were interested in starting ag classes, and that they had this whole garden built over there now after I left, and all this stuff, which is exciting for me to see. My old home school, which, granted, this school is built right next to a cornfield, so I mean, agriculture is literally right across the street. So it's just kind of a unique feeling for someone like me that came from that school. And just like I said earlier, I think that this program is really kind of just a cool idea.
Yeah.
Just getting to kind of talk to these kids about agriculture, about FFA, about high school, and I know, just to kind of give you guys a little brief story. Like I said, we were recruiting 8th graders, and I actually went with a couple of the kids to Live Oak, which was the middle school that Brandon and I both graduated from.
Yep.
And we went to go talk to some of these kids there, and there was a kid that asked all of the recruiters there the same question. He said, "Does chocolate milk really come from brown cows?" And this is kind of a funny question that people in the agriculture industry joke about, but it's a real question that a lot of people don't know the answer to. They think that chocolate milk,
really does.
Yeah, which, not to say there's anything wrong with those people who think that. It's important that they understand that that's not the case, and there are even some adults that think that today, and that's kind of dangerous, I guess you could say, to the agriculture industry. People who don't understand how these processes work, and so I think that your guys' task in educating these students about agriculture is something that's that should be more heavily given attention to, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Which it seems like it is. It seems like this is expanding pretty rapidly, which I'm personally glad to see happen.
Yeah. In fact, we're actually building a nursery out at Cherry Avenue. It's almost finished at this point, but we're building a nursery, and it's a great way to keep the students involved in agriculture, and just for them to always have something to do and always look back to and say, "Oh, look, I was growing tomatoes, or I was growing peppers, or I was doing something involved in the ag industry while I was at school." And a lot of the other kids from different schools don't have that experience to go back to, and it's just a really cool thing for us to do for those 8th graders.
Yeah, I think that's really, really unique. And something else I kind of just thought of is giving them that hands-on experience is, I think, the ultimate way to teach these kids.
That's why taking them on field trips was a lot of fun for them. They love the hands-on activities, and it shows them really what agriculture is about. There is a lot of hands-on involvement in agriculture. It's not just sitting at a desk all day doing computer work. It's more hands-on and getting your hands dirty and putting in the hard work.
Yeah, and I think these kids, you can teach them about whatever they want out of a textbook, but I don't think they truly process this information until they feel that dirt in their hands, or they get to actually see the cows out in the pasture, or they get to actually visit the vet clinic like you guys are talking about. I think that's something that is a unique opportunity that you guys are providing them, and I think that's something that's really really beneficial to not only their future but ours as well, because they're going to be the future generations that potentially feed us. So I think that's pretty cool. So kind of wrap up that idea a little bit and transition into our new one. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've learned through this experience of teaching these 8th graders?
Well, I kind of touched bases on this earlier, but I learned about myself that I have the ability to teach children or some not children. Yeah, children.
Yeah,
so
I guess you say
high school. I have the ability to teach high schoolers or middle schoolers about a certain subject that I'm passionate about, which in this case was agriculture. And I didn't know that before I was involved in this program. Before I was involved in this program, I was afraid I would be doing these kids a disservice if I wasn't truly teaching them to the best of my ability. But in fact, sometimes when I felt I was doing my worst, they were still interpreting all the information perfectly fine and still involved. And the best thing about this program is that they have someone they can go to that's only 4 or 5 years older than them, rather than go to their teacher, which they sometimes are uncomfortable speaking to, which is sometimes 20 or 30 years older than them. And the fact that they have somebody that they can go to that has been through it 2 or 3 years before them is just so much easier and more comfortable for them to get across their mind.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. I think that was something that's kind of important for the whole program that you guys are doing for that to even work in general. Is just kids tend to relate more to people closer to their age, and like you're saying, they're not going to listen to somebody 20 or 30 years older than them telling them something that they may or not believe. So I think that you guys talking to them being 16, 17, 18 years old, they relate to you guys a little bit more. They kind of look up to you almost like you're like an older sibling. Like they trust you and they trust what you're telling them. And I think another aspect of that is that because we're younger, because we're a newer generation, we've adapted language that's a little bit more comfortable for them to interpret, that maybe their teachers or advisors or other adults just don't really know how to use. We're able to communicate with them in a way that they're more understanding and more comfortable with, that I think it gives us an advantage in that sense. Definitely. Alright, so I think that kind of wraps up the whole 8th grade program, which I think once again is just a really unique aspect. That's one of the other reasons I wanted to bring Brandon on here, is because I knew that he was pretty involved in this thing, and I knew that he wanted to talk about it a little bit, so I thought that'd be good, especially because it kind of revolves our central theme of ag literacy here. And so moving into a somewhat similar topic, last year at the 89th annual State FFA Leadership Conference, I had the opportunity to be a delegate with a good friend of mine, and we voted on an amendment that allowed 7th and 8th grade FFA members to join our organization, part of the Discovery FFA program. And this is somewhat related to what you're doing, talking to these 8th graders and getting them involved in our organization as well. I kind of want to get your opinion on what what are the pros and cons to this program. What do you think is the best benefit to bringing in 7th and 8th grade FFA members, and what do you think are some potential hazards that we should be wary of?
So I'm just going to start off right off the bat. If you get somebody involved in a program for 2 more years and you allow them to develop themselves throughout the entire lifespan of that club, they're going to be a lot more successful than someone who has only been in it for 4 years. So somebody involved for 6 years is going to have more experience and more time to develop than someone who has been in it 4 years. It's common sense. So that's the biggest advantage of this Discovery FFA program. You're giving them more time to develop and more chances to experience agriculture in a larger time frame. Also, in the Discovery FFA program, we're giving them the opportunity to receive the right information sooner. So what I mean by that is, when you give a kid the information or the idea that chocolate milk does in fact come from brown cows, they're going to continue to think that until they're proven otherwise, which of course is wrong. But if you're giving them the right information, saying, well, chocolate milk does not come from brown cows, all milk that comes from cows is white. So when you're giving them that information at a younger age, they believe that until they're proven otherwise, which in this case will never happen because it's true. So when you're giving them the right information at an earlier time frame, they're better off in the future. And for those people that are given the wrong information and aren't proven otherwise, they're going to continue to relay that information back to the younger generation, and then you get a revolving cycle of bad. And that just causes a bunch of bad information that's spread, and which leads to the percentage of our population that doesn't know where their food comes from.
Which is 72%.
Which, yeah, according to the Farmers and Ranchers Alliance survey or something like that.
Yes,
Was that what it was? It was 72% does not know where their food comes from. So that is 28%. Only 28% of our population knows where our food comes from. So that number definitely needs to increase.
That's right.
And through this program, I believe we will get that number at least a little bit higher.
That's kind of the dream here. And I think in addition to the agricultural education that's potentially available for these new members, I wouldn't say in addition to, actually. We have these 7th and 8th grade members that are going to be joining FFA. They already have, well, potentially, at least in our area, they already have access to agricultural education in the form of like the program that you're doing, or in the form of 4-H, and they have other programs available. I think kind of the main advantage to them joining FFA at such a young age is they get a first-hand perspective about kind of the things we were talking about earlier, the leadership development, the career success, and the personal growth that we kind of saw through our 4 years in high school. They get to see it before we got to. I mean, I think that's a very rare experience for someone at their age to have, and not to say that they need to be forced into speaking and judging teams at such a young age, because that's still something that's being debated today. But I think it's an experience that can help greatly affect their involvement in the program. That can help greatly affect their involvement in their communities and their leadership potential. And could you imagine, I mean, you see where we're at today compared to how we were as freshmen.
Yeah.
Could you imagine where we would be today if we had 2 extra years of this?
I definitely would have spoken more in my 7th grade year. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Not as shy. That would have
Yeah.
been for sure.
So I think you're on the right track with the whole agriculture education thing. It's better to teach kids at a younger age, so that way they grow up to be more agriculturally literate, or at least that's the idea. But I think that what we're doing now, talking on this podcast about these kinds of issues, I think if we teach these kids at an even younger age, at 7th and 8th grade, that these issues exist, that that they have a voice and they have the ability to relay this information, the correct information like you're talking about, I think that will greatly benefit our future generations and the future, of agriculture in general. I think that we have a huge opportunity here, and I think you were kind of going towards that with your your analogy of the kids that with the chocolate with the chocolate milk coming from brown cows. So in terms of harmfulness, what do you see any potential hazards with Discovery FFA?
Yeah, there is one issue that I kind of see in this program. It's that we're bringing in more students, which is good, but at the same time, is it too much to where our programs can't handle it? So we have how many more students would we say about? If we were to do it in our town, it'd probably be like 400 students maybe.
I mean, with as many middle schools as we have, I'm sure we could get that number.
Yeah, we could get that. So we bring 400 more students into our program, and we already have 500 right now.
We have more than that. We have 600 or 700.
We have 600 or 700 in our program, and that's just in our chapter. We have 600 or 700 students, and then we would bring in an additional 400. That would be a little too much for our chapter to handle. Not saying it couldn't be done, but it would be a little bit extra workload for everyone involved. So that's the only issue I see. It's just a little bit more work we got to get through, but it definitely could be done.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. I think it would be a little bit overwhelming at first to have that many members join our organization at once, but we already are starting to see some 7th and 8th grade members integrated into our system. I mean, I actually got the chance to talk to some at state convention, and that was kind of a cool opportunity to get to talk to them and see what their thoughts on the whole convention were and on FFA in general. And I think that the adaptation to this boom of population would be pretty easy to match. It just might take some time. But I think that's also assuming that all of these members would join at once, which I don't think is the case. I think it takes some time for all of these chapters to kind of grow and develop, because there's
talked a lot
high
today
schools
about
today they don't have FFA
involvement,
programs, let alone
opportunities,
middle
and kinds of
schools.
things that FFA
So I think that
provides for us a lot of
there
things
is
that
time
we've
for us to
done.
adapt, like you were saying. I think it can be done.
I'm going to kind of give you
it's just a matter of
hypothetical situation here. If you had the
engaging ourselves
chance
in
to
understanding
restart
our limitations,
restart FFA,
so I think that kind of covers what
you regret not
what we were
getting
going to talk
involved
about as far as the
discovery
get program
or
goes,
advise other
and that kind of leads us into the conclusion.
I
of
definitely
today's
would be
episode.
more involved in the judging and speaking aspect of FFA if I was given the opportunity to restart high school, which can't happen. But if that hypothetical situation would occur, I would definitely be more involved in the speaking and judging aspect of it. I would probably join extemporaneous speaking. I thought that was a pretty cool part of FFA, and I would also join many judging teams. I probably would do dairy. I was pretty good at citrus judging. Just you could probably add that if you want, but I definitely would have been on more teams. The only team I was a part of through FFA was my freshman year. I was on an opening, closing speaking team, and I was only one competition, so it was one and done kind of thing. But for those of you that are wanting to get involved in FFA and wanting to join speaking teams or do something in FFA, I would highly recommend being on speaking teams, being on judging teams, being on a show team, or being an officer. That's what I regret a lot about not joining any judging or speaking teams, is that it didn't give me the opportunity, or a fair opportunity, to be an officer. So those are some of the key points that I would recommend being a part of if you were wanting to join the team. That's what I would highly recommend for those of you.
And when he says, because he talked a little bit about being an officer, and how if you don't do judging or speaking teams, you're going to have less of a fair chance to be an officer. In saying this, basically what he means is, when you're an officer, you don't necessarily have to do judging or speaking teams. But if you do have that background knowledge in your mind, if you do have that experience and that skill of talking in front of people and communicating with others and making friends, that's going to benefit you so much. Just, not even just being an officer, just in general, being able to walk into a room and just like talk to people, or being able to give a speech in front of a group of your peers. That's just something that's like so huge, such an enormous skill to have. And I go out and I talk in front of adults, and they're like blown away by my ability just to be able to talk. And they go up to me and say, "How are you so good at talking?" Like, well, I do FFA. That's just something like we are just conditioned to speak. And Brandon here, while not doing any speaking teams, while not being an officer, just through his years in FFA, he still developed a very significant ability to talk in front of people. And it's something that a lot of kids, if you just pick from when you're in high school, they wouldn't be able to do. And it has nothing to do with, he's just a natural born speaker, because him and I both, as 8th graders, were very shy. We didn't really talk to a lot of people. We were very just closed in, and we wouldn't really
stuck to ourselves.
Yeah, and like all we do is play baseball. That was all that was our whole life. We didn't talk to anybody. And we had our friends, obviously, but through our years in FFA, we become so social and active and engaging, and it has nothing to do with speaking teams and judging teams and being an officer. Although those things greatly amplify your ability to be social and outspoken and capable of doing the kinds of things that we do. So kind of just to wrap up here, Brandon, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, through your 8th grade involvement, through your talking to these students who you're trying to get to join FFA, what are some of the things that you've told them in terms of advice, or what are some things you would want to tell members that are going to be joining FFA in terms of advice as they come in?
Just be involved. Being involved is so key to being an FFA, because we have students in our chapter that aren't as involved as most of us, and I don't feel like they get the true experience that an FFA member really gets. So when you're involved and you are on a showing team or a speaking team or a judging team, you just get so many more experiences, and you get to learn a lot more about yourself and about others that you wouldn't learn if you just sat at home So that's just what I would recommend.
Awesome. All right, so I think we're getting closer to the end of this episode here. Brandon, do you have any final remarks any comments you want to make?
Just get used to my voice, everyone. I'll probably be back on here at least 2 more times.
At least 2 more times. That's your goal. Make it back on the show 2 more times.
We'll see.
You might be on here more than that because, like I said, if my co-hosts aren't available, I might just call you up and say, hey, can you record an episode real quick? But we'll see how that goes.
Hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
And so we're starting to wrap up the episode here. So make sure you guys, if you have any topics you want to hear on the show, if you have anything you want us to discuss, next episode will be going towards a more ag issues related topic, and you'll get to see what that is next week. So make sure you tune in. But if you have anything you want us to talk about, anything you want to hear, or maybe if you have somebody you want to be on the podcast, or maybe you want to be on the podcast, make sure you get a hold of us on our social media, comment on our YouTube videos, just get a hold of us, and we'll make sure to talk about it, and because one of the goals we talked about in our first episode here is we want to build a community with you guys. We want you guys to be involved, and so we can't do that without your guys' help. So yeah, make sure you guys get a hold of us, make sure you guys like we were talking about, get involved, and that's gonna be the ultimate way that we help you help us. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up here.
Yep. All right. We'll see you guys later.
And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.